According to YouTube analytics, 98% of viewers are not subscribed. That's a huge number. By subscribing the channel that is completely free, the emergency medical override at Galactic Academy triggered automatically when Professor Zyl'ax's arm bent backwards at an angle that violated 3 different species' anatomical possibilities, and the human exchange student who'd just done it looked more horrified than anyone else in the lecture hall. Oh God, I'm so sorry. Sarah Jackson stumbled backward, hands shaking as she stared at what she'd done. The Velkin professor crumpled to the floor, his lavender-tinged face going pale white as his arm hung at an impossible angle. The medical AI's voice blared through every speaker in the room. Critical injury detected. Emergency response initiated. Lockdown protocols engaging. 47 students from across the galaxy sat frozen in their seats. Nobody moved, nobody breathed. They just stared at the human girl who'd grabbed their professor's arm during an argument and broken it like it was made of glass. I didn't mean to. He was... Sarah's voice cracked, tears already streaming down her face. I barely touched him. The lecture hall doors slammed shut with a metallic clang that made half the class flinch. Red emergency lights began rotating across the walls. Professor Zyl'ax groaned, his 3-fingered hand clutching at his destroyed arm. She attacked me, he wheezed, witnessed by entire class. No, I wasn't attacking, I was just... Sarah's hands hovered uselessly in front of her like she was afraid to touch anything else. You were insulting Earth metallurgy for 20 minutes straight. I was trying to show you that you were wrong about our titanium composites, and I just reached for your arm to... Security en route, the AI announced clinically. All students remain seated. The human student will remain stationary and visible at all times. The human student. Not even her name. Just her species, said like a threat classification. A Therian student in the 3rd row had his recording device pointed directly at Sarah, his antenna quivering. Next to him, a Paxian was frantically typing on her datapad, probably already sending the footage to every social network in the galaxy. In the back corner, Sarah's lab partner, Lir'ana, sat with her crystalline hands pressed against her mouth, her usually luminescent skin flickering with distress. I need medical assistance immediately, Zyl'ax hissed, his pain apparently not preventing him from maintaining his air of superiority. Even injured on the floor, he managed to sound condescending. This Deathworld primitive has demonstrated exactly why her kind should never have been admitted to civilized academic institutions. Sarah's jaw clenched. I said I was sorry. Sorry? Zyl'ax laughed, a sound that came out more like a pained gasp. You grabbed my arm with enough force to shatter bone. Do you comprehend what you've done? This isn't your barbaric homeworld where you can solve disagreements with violence. It wasn't violence. I just wanted to... Sarah's voice broke. I've been so careful, so careful for 6 months. I barely even shake hands with people because I'm terrified of this exact... The doors burst open and 4 security officers stormed in, wearing full protective gear that Sarah had never seen before. Energy shields hummed at maximum strength. Weapons, actual weapons, were drawn and pointed in her direction. Human student, place your hands on your head and do not move, the lead officer commanded, his voice distorted through his helmet speaker. Sarah's hands shot up immediately, trembling violently. I didn't mean to hurt him. Please, you have to believe me. I thought I was being gentle. Gentle? One of the security officers exchanged glances with his partner. Command, we need classification on human strength parameters. Subject claims the injury was caused by gentle contact. Across campus, Dean Kael'thas's personal communicator lit up with priority, 1 emergency codes he'd never actually seen activated in his 30 years of administration. He was in a meeting with the Interspecies Curriculum Board when the alert came through. Emergency, Category 5 incident, Materials Science. Lecture Hall, 7B Nature, Interspecies Violence, Victim, Professor Zyl'ax, Velkin, Severe Physical Trauma, Perpetrator, Sarah Jackson, Human. contained but not restrained. Status, medical en route, security on site, lockdown active warning, human strength capabilities severely underestimated in orientation protocols. Dean Kael'thas felt his 3 hearts skip in a synchronized pattern of dread. A human had injured a faculty member. A human. Those walking disasters from the death planet that the Galactic Council had insisted on integrating into the academic community, despite every safety expert's protests. He pulled up the security feed on his datapad and watched the footage. Watched the small human girl, barely over 5 feet tall, couldn't weigh more than 120 pounds by Earth measurements, grab the professor's arm during what looked like a heated academic discussion. It happened so fast the cameras almost missed it. One moment they were arguing, the next the professor was on the ground with his arm destroyed. The human hadn't even looked angry, just frustrated, like someone making an emphatic point during a debate. "Get me the human embassy," Kael'thas ordered, already running toward the lecture hall. "And someone pull this Jackson student's complete file. I want to know everything about her behavioral history, now." In the lecture hall, the medical team arrived and swarmed Professor Zyl'ax with scanners and emergency stabilizers. The lead medic looked at the injury, then at Sarah, then back at the injury with visible confusion. "This break pattern," the medic muttered. "The force required to create this specific type of compound fracture would require industrial-grade compression equipment. How did a single grab?" "Because she's from a Deathworld," Zyl'ax snarled through, gritted teeth as they loaded him onto a medical transport. "Earth, where everything is trying to kill you and the natives evolved into walking biological weapons. I warned the administration this would happen. I specifically warned them." Sarah sat down hard on the floor, pulling her knees to her chest, making herself as small as possible while security kept their weapons trained on her. She looked at her own hands like they belonged to someone else, like they were alien objects she couldn't control. "I just wanted to show him our titanium samples weren't primitive," she whispered to no one in particular. "That's all. That's literally all I wanted to do." The security team leader circled Sarah like she was an unexploded munition, his shield crackling with protective energy. "We need to secure the human," he said slowly into his comm. "But our restraint protocols are designed for species with standard musculature. Command, what's the procedure for safely restraining someone who can apparently pulverize bone with casual contact?" "There isn't one," came the reply. "We're checking the human integration guidelines now. Stand by." Sarah looked up at them, tears still running down her face. "I'm not going to run or fight or anything. I'll cooperate with whatever you need. Just, please, don't point those at me like I'm some kind of monster." "Miss Jackson," the officer said carefully, "can you describe exactly what happened? How hard did you grab the professor's arm?" "I didn't. I did grab it, but Sarah wiped at her eyes frantically. "He spent the last 20 minutes of class telling everyone that human metallurgy was barely above Stone Age standards, and that Earth's titanium composites were primitive attempts at real engineering. I just wanted to show him the sample I brought, and I reached for his arm to get his attention, and..." Her voice dissolved into sobs. "I was being careful. I'm always careful." "Boss," one of the other officers whispered, pulling up data on his wrist display. "Medical team just sent preliminary analysis. Professor Zyl'ax's bone density is typical for Velkans, about 1.2 on the standard scale. The break pattern suggests compression force equivalent to..." He paused, double-checking the numbers. "Equivalent to a hydraulic press operating at industrial capacity." The lead officer's face went rigid. "And she says she was being careful." "I was!" Sarah's shout made every student in the room flinch backward. She immediately lowered her voice, looking devastated. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to yell, but I was. I've been careful every single day since I got here. Do you know how exhausting it is to remember that everything around you is made of tissue paper? That everyone you meet could break if you mess up even a little?" Dean Kael'thas burst through the doors, his official robes billowing behind him. He took in the scene, the security team in full combat gear, the human girl sitting on the floor crying. The blood where Zyl'ax had fallen, and felt a migraine forming behind his primary eyes. "Someone explain this situation to me in terms that make sense," he demanded. "Now." The security officer pulled up the security footage on a floating holo display. Everyone watched as the recording played back at quarter speed. Sarah and Professor Zyl'ax were clearly arguing. The professor's body language was aggressive, dismissive, punctuating his words with sharp gestures. Sarah looked increasingly frustrated, her hands moving emphatically as she tried to make her point. Then Sarah reached for the professor's arm, just a simple grab to turn him toward her display screen, and the arm bent. The footage clearly showed her fingers closing around his forearm with what looked like normal, everyday pressure. Nothing aggressive, nothing violent, just grip, and his arm shattered. "Replay that," Kael'thas ordered. "Focus on the grip pressure sensors." The footage rewound. Enhanced sensor data overlaid the image. When Sarah's hand made contact, the sensors registered the pressure as 2.1, casual contact, non-aggressive. "That can't be right," one of the security officers muttered. 2.1 shouldn't even register as a concern. That's like bumping into someone in a hallway. "That's what I'm trying to tell you," Sarah said desperately. "I thought I was barely touching him. I grab things rated at 2.0 all the time. Door handles, chairs, my data pad, and nothing breaks." "Miss Jackson," Dean Kael'thas said slowly, "what do your door handles at home rate on the pressure scale?" Sarah blinked at him through her tears. "What?" "I don't know. I've never checked." "Why would I check? They're just door handles." Kael'thas pulled up her dormitory maintenance records. His face went pale. "Your room has had 17 door handle replacements in 6 months. We assumed it was vandalism." "Wait, other people's handles don't break?" "No," 3 security officers shouted simultaneously. Lyrana raised a shaking crystalline hand from her seat. "Dean Kael'thas? I'm Sarah's roommate. May I speak?" "Please," Kael'thas said, grateful for any information that might make this nightmare make sense. Lyrana stood, her light flickering nervously. "Sarah practices opening our door for 5 minutes every morning. I thought it was a human meditation ritual. She stands there and very, very slowly turns the handle while counting to 10. Every single morning." The lecture hall fell silent. "Because I kept breaking them," Sarah whispered. "I got written up 3 times in the first month for property damage. So I started practicing, being gentle, going slow." She looked at her hands again. "I thought I was getting better at it." A Therian student in the front row hesitantly raised a tentacle. "Dean Kael'thas? Professor Zyl'ax has been saying things about Deathworld species. All semester." "What kind of things?" "That humans are genetic accidents who should have killed themselves off during their own evolution," another student offered quietly. "That Earth species only survived because they're too stupid to recognize they should be extinct." "He called Sarah a walking catastrophe waiting to happen last week," someone else added. "Said humans had no place in academic settings because they're mentally incapable of complex thought." Kael'thas's migraine intensified. "And none of you reported this?" Guilty silence. "He's a tenured professor," Lyrana said softly. "Who listens to students when they complain about professors?" The dean's communicator buzzed with an incoming priority message. "Galactic Council representatives dispatched to investigate human integration failure. Arrival in 4 hours." "Wonderful," Kael'thas muttered. Then, louder, "I want every piece of security footage from Professor Zyl'ax's classes this semester. I want witness statements from every student, and someone get me the human strength baseline data that was apparently missing from our safety protocols." "Sir," the lead security officer said hesitantly, "we'd like to have Miss Jackson demonstrate a gentle grip on our force measurement equipment." "For calibration purposes." Sarah stood slowly, approached the extended sensor device like it might bite her. "You want me to just grab it?" "Gently, yes, as gentle as you can be." Sarah reached out, touched the sensor handle with what looked like the lightest possible contact. Every alarm in the device screamed simultaneously. The display board flickered through numbers too fast to read before displaying error, force, exceeds maximum threshold, recalibration required. I wasn't even squeezing, Sarah said, pulling her hand back in horror. That was just resting my fingers on it. Dean Kael'thas stared at the sparking force sensor, then at the small human girl who'd just broken it by touching it gently, then at the security team that was supposed to restrain her if necessary. "Get me the human embassy," he said quietly, and someone explained to me how we've had a human student on campus for 6 months without anyone realizing she could accidentally kill someone by being friendly. 2 hours later, Sarah sat in what they called protective observation, a windowless room with furniture bolted to the floor and walls reinforced with something that looked suspiciously like blast plating. She wasn't handcuffed because nobody knew what material could actually restrain a human without either breaking or cutting off circulation. So she just sat there, hands in her lap, under constant camera surveillance. The Interspecies Relations Board had convened an emergency session in the adjacent conference room. Through the supposedly soundproof walls, Sarah could hear raised voices arguing in 6 different languages. "This is precisely why the Deathworld integration program was a mistake," someone shouted. "She injured a tenured professor. There must be consequences." "We don't even have a protocol for this." Sarah put her head in her hands. Her academic career was over, probably her freedom too. She'd survived 6 months of being the only human at Galactic Academy, 6 months of constant vigilance, of moving through the world like she was made of explosives, and it had all fallen apart because she'd lost her temper for 1 second. 1 second. The door opened and Ambassador Maria Rodriguez walked in, her expression professionally neutral. She was the first human Sarah had seen in 3 months, and the relief was almost physical. "Miss Jackson," Ambassador Rodriguez said, sitting down across from her, "I've reviewed the security footage and preliminary reports. Tell me what happened in your own words." Sarah explained everything, the months of insults, the systematic mockery, the final comment that broke her control. "He called us barely sentient apes playing at civilization," she whispered, "and I couldn't take it anymore." I grabbed his arm. I didn't hit him. I didn't attack him. I just grabbed him and his arm shattered because Velkan bone density is approximately 1/8 of human bone density, Rodriguez finished calmly. "Sarah, do you know what force rating you typically operate at here?" No? I try to be as gentle as possible with everything." Rodriguez pulled up a data pad. "Your engineering lab supervisor sent over a report. In the past semester, you've broken 12 precision instruments that are rated for standard academic use. 3 micrometers, 4 calipers, 2 pressure gauges, and 3 digital measurement displays." "I was being careful with those," Sarah protested. "I know. The lab notes indicate you were extremely cautious and notably gentle with all equipment." Rodriguez scrolled through more data. "Your dormitory has replaced 17 door handles, 8 chair backs, 3 desk drawers, and the railing on your bunk bed. Twice." Sarah felt her face burning. "I didn't know other species' stuff didn't break like that." "Because you've been operating at approximately 0.3% of your actual strength capacity for 6 months straight," Rodriguez said. "We have psychologists who specialize in Deathworld integration trauma, Sarah. You should have been referred to them on day 1. "Trauma? I'm not traumatized, You're terrified of your own body," Rodriguez interrupted gently. "You practice opening doors. You've developed anxiety-related insomnia because you're afraid of rolling over in your sleep and breaking your bed. Your roommate reports you sometimes cry at night because you're scared of hurting someone by accident." Sarah's eyes filled with tears again. "Everyone here is so fragile. They're like porcelain dolls walking around having normal lives, and I'm this walking disaster that could kill someone by giving them a high five." "That's not an exaggeration, by the way," Rodriguez said. "Human high five impact force would hospitalize most species here. But Sarah, that's why we have integration. Protocols. You should have had daily counseling, species interaction training, and attended mixed-strength activity groups with other Deathworld students. There are no other Deathworld students. I'm the only one. Rodriguez's expression darkened. That's a violation of integration policy. No human should be the sole high-gravity species in any academic environment. She made a note on her datapad. The board is currently reviewing all the evidence. It's not looking good for Professor Zyl'ax. What do you mean? I'm the one who broke his arm. Professor Zyl'ax has been systematically harassing you for months, Rodriguez said. We've pulled footage from every one of his lectures. He's made 47 documented xenophobic comments directed specifically at you or Earth in general. His colleagues are already providing statements. Before Sarah could respond, Dean Kael'thas entered with Lyrana trailing nervously behind him. Miss Jackson, Kael'thas said, looking exhausted, your roommate has provided some illuminating testimony. Lyrana's crystalline form was flickering rapidly with distress. I'm sorry, Sarah, but they needed to know. You don't sleep more than 4 hours a night. You won't eat in the cafeteria because you're afraid of accidentally breaking the plates. You practice picking up your datapad 20 times every morning before classes. You once spent 40 minutes trying to figure out how to pet the dean's office cat without hurting it. His name is Whiskers, and he's very soft, and I didn't want to squeeze him, Sarah burst out. The cat weighs 8 pounds, Rodriguez said. You could bench press 800 pounds without significant effort. Sarah stared at her. That can't be right. Sarah, what do you think human teenagers do for gym class on Earth? I don't know. Lift weights? Run? Normal stuff? The weights you were lifting in high school would be considered industrial construction equipment here, Rodriguez said bluntly. A human child, is stronger than 90% of species in this sector. You're not a walking disaster. You're a baseline human operating in an environment that was never properly calibrated for your species. Kael'thas cleared his throat. We've also received testimony from Professor Zyl'ax's teaching assistant. Apparently, the professor knew about Miss Jackson's anxiety regarding her strength. Multiple students report he would deliberately move closer to her during confrontations, or accidentally bump into her while making disparaging comments about human clumsiness. He was trying to provoke an incident, Rodriguez said, her voice sharp with anger. He wanted proof that humans were too dangerous for academic settings. And I gave it to him, Sarah said miserably. No, Kael'thas said firmly. You endured systematic harassment for 6 months while operating under extreme psychological duress in an environment that failed you at every institutional level. And when you finally reacted with what you perceived as minimal force, our inadequate safety protocols and his deliberately fragile physiology created this disaster. Sarah looked between them. So, what happens now? Now, Rodriguez smiled grimly. Now, the Galactic Council has to explain why they integrated humans into academic programs without proper strength differential protocols, and Professor Zyl'ax has to explain his harassment campaign to the board. Meanwhile, Kael'thas added, we're emergency implementing human-rated equipment across campus, stronger door handles, reinforced furniture, and force calibration training for all faculty and students. And Sarah? Rodriguez said, standing. You're going to meet with Dr. Chen, our human psychologist, who specializes in helping people like you understand that being strong isn't the same as being dangerous. Sarah looked at her hands, the hands that could apparently bench press 1/2 ton, that broke precision instruments while trying to be gentle, that had shattered a professor's arm without even trying. I just wanted to study engineering, she whispered. And you will, Rodriguez said firmly. But first, we're going to teach you that you're not a monster. You're just human. And that's more than enough. The Interspecies Relations Board reconvened 4 hours later with Ambassador Rodriguez presenting evidence that made 3 council members physically leave the room. This, Rodriguez projected onto the main display, is a human strength comparison chart. The red line represents average human female capabilities. Sarah Jackson is 19 years old, weighs 58 kilograms, and is considered slightly below average strength for her demographic. The chart showed human baseline strength overlaid against 200 other species. The human line towered above almost everything else. "That's impossible," board member Kyldra said flatly. "You're telling us that a below-average human child is stronger than a fully mature Velkan adult?" "Not just Velkans," Rodriguez said. "Stronger than 90% of all species in this sector. Human children, ages 6 to 10, regularly exceed the strength capacity of most adult aliens you interact with daily." She pulled up another image, a smiling human boy, maybe 8 years old, easily holding a 25-kilogram weight in each hand. "This is what human elementary school physical education looks like. We call this light exercise for kids." The room fell silent. "Now," Rodriguez continued, "let's discuss what Miss Jackson actually did. We've run biomechanical analysis on the security footage." She played it back frame by frame. Sarah's grip pressure when she grabbed Professor Zyl'ax's arm registered at force level 2.1, what she perceived as gentle contact. For comparison, when a human is genuinely angry and uses full strength, the force rating exceeds 50. 50? Someone whispered. Sarah was operating at roughly 4% of her actual capacity when she grabbed the professor. She was, by human standards, showing remarkable restraint. Kael'thas stood, looking ill. "Are you saying that if Miss Jackson had genuinely attacked the professor, there wouldn't have been enough left to identify?" Rodriguez said bluntly. "An angry human grab at full strength would have pulverized his arm into powder." Sarah broke his arm. She didn't shatter it, didn't tear it off, didn't destroy the surrounding tissue. She broke it. Which means even in rage, she was still holding back. The board members looked at each other in horror. "We need a demonstration," Kyldra said, "something to help us understand the actual scope of human capabilities." 20 minutes later, they'd assembled in the Academy gymnasium. Sarah stood in the center, looking miserable and embarrassed, while Ambassador Rodriguez explained the test. "Miss Jackson is going to lift the weight bench over there, the one with all the plates loaded." Sarah walked over to the bench. The bar was loaded with every weight plate the gymnasium owned, easily 400 kilograms of metal. She bent down, gripped the bar, and lifted it overhead in one smooth motion. She held it there, barely straining, while the board stared. "How much can you actually lift?" Kael'thas asked quietly. "I don't know," Sarah admitted, lowering the weight. "I've never maxed out." "That's not even heavy enough to make me tired." Rodriguez nodded to the equipment manager, who began using an anti-grav dolly to move all 47 chairs from Lecture Hall 7B into the gymnasium. They stacked them in an enormous pile. "Total weight, 847 kilograms, the manager announced. "Sarah, if you would," Rodriguez said. Sarah approached the pile, positioned herself, and lifted the entire stack, all 47 chairs. She held them over her head while the board watched in stunned silence. "And you say she's below average strength?" Kyldra asked weakly. "For a human female her age?" "Yes, my 15-year-old nephew could lift more." Sarah set the chairs down carefully, her face burning with embarrassment. "Can we please stop making me look like a circus attraction?" "One more demonstration," Rodriguez said. "Officer Vex Thule, would you volunteer?" The security officer who'd responded to the original incident stepped forward nervously. He still had his protective gear on. "You can remove that," Rodriguez said. "Miss Jackson is going to pick you up, gently." "I really don't think," Vex Thule began. "Please," Sarah said softly. "I need to show everyone I'm not going to hurt anyone." Vex Thule reluctantly removed his armor. Sarah approached slowly, telegraphing every movement. She placed her hands under his arms and lifted him off the ground as easily as picking up a house cat. Vex Thule went rigid with terror, but Sarah just held him there, steady and careful. "Feel her grip pressure," Rodriguez instructed. "It's nothing," Vex Thule said, surprised. "I can barely feel her hands, like she's barely touching me." "Because she's using approximately 0.5% of her strength," Rodriguez said. Sarah, what would happen if you squeezed right now? Sarah's face went pale. I'd kill him. Instantly. She set Vexthul down with extraordinary care. The officer stepped back, looking at Sarah with new understanding. Not fear exactly, but profound respect mixed with awe. Every single interaction Miss Jackson has had at this academy, Rodriguez addressed the board, has required this level of conscious control. Every handshake, every door opened, every piece of equipment touched. She has been living in constant fear of accidentally killing someone by being friendly. Board member Talana spoke up, her voice shaking. We've reviewed Professor Zyl'ax's record, 47 documented xenophobic comments toward Miss Jackson, 12 complaints from other students about harassment that he personally suppressed as department head. Evidence suggesting he deliberately engineered confrontations with Deathworld students to prove they were dangerous. He wanted an incident, Kyle Thoss said heavily. He got one. The charges against Miss Jackson are hereby dropped, Talana announced officially. Furthermore, Professor Zyl'ax is suspended pending full investigation. If the harassment allegations are substantiated, he will face disciplinary action up to and including termination. Sarah's knees almost gave out with relief. Thank you. Thank you so much. Don't thank us yet, Kyle Thoss said. We failed you, Miss Jackson, failed to provide proper integration support, failed to recognize harassment, failed to understand the constant burden you were carrying. He stepped forward, executing a formal galactic apology gesture. On behalf of Galactic Academy, I apologize. We will do better. We're implementing immediate changes, Talana added. Human-rated equipment across campus, mandatory strength awareness training for all faculty and students, counseling resources for Deathworld species integration, and we're recruiting more human students. You should never have been alone. Lirana rushed forward and carefully hugged Sarah, her crystalline arms barely touching. I'm organizing a support group, everyone who wants to learn about humans and make sure you never feel isolated again. Sarah laughed, tears streaming down her face. You guys know I could accidentally crush you all, right? We know, Lirana said. That's why we're learning. So you don't have to be scared anymore. Ambassador Rodriguez smiled. Dr. Chen will meet with you tomorrow, and Sarah, your academic record is perfect. Straight A's in every class. Your professors say you're brilliant, helpful to classmates, and one of the best students they've ever taught. Despite being a barely sentient ape? Sarah asked bitterly. No, Kelthas corrected gently. Despite us failing to create an environment where your brilliance could exist without terror. That changes now. Sarah looked at her hands again, but this time, instead of seeing weapons, she tried to see what Rodriguez saw, what her friends saw. Just hands. Human hands. Strong, yes. Dangerous, potentially. But also capable of helping, building, creating. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough. 3 weeks later, Sarah Jackson stood in front of a packed auditorium at the Academy-wide Assembly on Deathworld Species Integration and Respect. 200 students and faculty from 40 different species watched as she lifted a standard desk with one hand. This desk, Sarah said conversationally, is rated for 15 kilograms of pressure. That's normal for most of you. She set it down and picked up an identical-looking desk marked with a bright red human symbol. This one is rated for 200 kilograms. It's what the Academy is now calling human functional equipment. She proceeded to demonstrate the difference by gripping both desks. The standard desk crumpled like paper. The human-rated one didn't even creak. Questions? Sarah asked. A Therian student raised a tentacle. How do you remember which things are safe to use at full strength? I don't use full strength, Sarah said simply. Ever. That's what everyone needs to understand. Humans at this academy are always operating at a fraction of capacity. We have to be. Dean Kelthas stood from his seat. which is why we've installed force warning systems in high traffic areas. If a human accidentally uses more than 10% strength capacity, proximity alarms will alert nearby individuals to maintain safe distance. Has that actually happened? Someone asked nervously. Twice, Sarah admitted. Once when I sneezed and grabbed a railing for balance, and once when someone startled me in the library and I reflexively pushed away from my desk. Both times, the alarms gave everyone 3 seconds warning. Nobody got hurt. Lirana stood up from the front row. I want everyone to know that Sarah practices basic movements every single day. Opening doors, picking up data pads, even hugging. She flickered with amusement. She once spent 2 hours learning how to high-five me without breaking my hand. Did it work? Someone called out. Eventually, Lirana held up her crystalline hand, intact and undamaged. Though I was terrified the first 15 attempts. The auditorium laughed. Actual laughter, not the nervous kind from 3 weeks ago. The engineering department has requested Miss Jackson's consultation on durable design standards, Kael'thas announced. We're redesigning equipment across campus based on her feedback. Additionally, she'll be teaching a seminar next semester. Human Strength Management and Cross-Species Safety Protocols. Sarah groaned. You're making me teach people how not to be accidentally killed by me. That's so weird. It's necessary, Ambassador Rodriguez said from her seat in the back. And you're not alone anymore. She gestured to the entrance where 5 more human students walked in, the new exchange students who'd just arrived that morning. Sarah's face lit up with relief and joy. Finally, she breathed. People I can high-five without worrying. The assembly concluded with the announcement that Professor Zyl'ax had been formally suspended and required to complete extensive diversity training before potentially returning to teaching. More significantly, the investigation had uncovered a network of harassment complaints from other Deathworld species students that he'd systematically suppressed over 5 years. Turns out I wasn't his only target, Sarah told Lirana later as they walked back to their dorm. 3 other students came forward. He'd been running a campaign to get Deathworld species banned from the academy. And now he's banned instead, Lirana said with satisfaction. Justice. They passed a group of students struggling to move a broken piece of lab equipment. Sarah walked over without thinking and picked up the entire apparatus, easily 300 kilograms of metal and composite. Where do you want it? The students stared for a moment, then one pointed to the recycling depot. Over there, if you don't mind. No problem. Sarah carried it across the courtyard like it was made of foam. When she returned, one of the students offered a tentative high five. Sarah carefully, precisely, gently tapped her palm against his. The student's face broke into a grin. She barely even touched me, he announced proudly to his friends. Sarah laughed. That's literally the point, yeah. Back in their room, Sarah sat at her reinforced desk, one of the new human-rated models, and pulled out her data pad. She still gripped it with extreme care, still wrote her notes at approximately 0.3% of her actual strength capacity. Some things hadn't changed, but other things had. The door handle was rated for human use now. She could open it in one motion instead of her 5-minute careful ritual. The chair didn't creak ominously when she sat down. Her bed frame was reinforced titanium instead of the standard alloy that had broken twice before. More importantly, she wasn't terrified anymore. Hey Sarah, Lirana said from her bunk. You know how I tell everyone I have the most dangerous roommate in the galaxy? Yeah, thanks for that. Sarah rolled her eyes. I've been thinking about it. You're not the most dangerous, you're the most careful. Lirana's glow softened with affection. You're the person who practices opening doors so you don't break them, who counts to 10 before picking anything up, who spent an hour learning to pet Whiskers without hurting him. Whiskers is very soft, Sarah said defensively. My point is, Lirana continued, humans aren't dangerous. You're all just really, really strong people trying very hard not to break anything. That's different. Sarah felt something tight in her chest finally loosen. We're all just remarkably breakable to us, you know that? We know. That's why we're learning too. Across campus, Dean Kael'thas sat in his office reviewing security footage from the past 3 weeks. Every recording showed the same pattern. Sarah moving through the academy with extreme care, helping classmates, studying in the library, always conscious of her strength, always careful. One clip showed her catching a falling student who'd tripped on the stairs, her hands shooting out to steady them with perfect control, her face showing intense concentration as she made sure her grip was gentle enough not to injure, but firm enough to prevent a fall. Another showed her in the lab, working on a delicate circuit assembly with tools designed for species with fine motor control. She was using approximately 2% of her strength capacity, her hands steady as a surgeon's, creating something beautiful with the same power that could crush steel. They walk through our galaxy like giants among porcelain, Kael'thas murmured to himself, and we never noticed because they were trying so hard not to break anything. His communicator chimed with an incoming message from the Galactic Council. They were requesting Galactic Academy's new Deathworld integration protocols for distribution to all educational institutions. 17 other academies had already reported similar incidents. Deathworld species students living in fear, operating under extreme psychological stress, one accident away from catastrophe. All because nobody had bothered to understand what peaceful coexistence actually required when one species could accidentally kill another by being friendly. The message ended with a note. Human Cultural Liaison confirms. Humans describe their experience in our institutions as walking on eggshells. Given their strength capacity, this metaphor is disturbingly literal. Kael'thas closed his eyes and thought about Sarah Jackson, who'd broken a professor's arm and spent 6 months terrified of her own hands, who practiced opening doors and cried about maybe hurting someone, who was now teaching seminars on how to exist in a galaxy that wasn't built for her kind. In her dorm room, Sarah finished her homework, carefully saved the file, and set her datapad down with the unconscious precision of someone who'd learned that everything around her could break. Lyrana was already asleep, her bioluminescence dimmed to a soft glow. Sarah smiled, pulled a book from her shelf, human-rated, printed on reinforced paper, and settled in to read. Just another mundane evening at Galactic Academy. Just another human, living carefully in a fragile universe. Just another student, finally understanding that being strong didn't mean being a monster. Outside, the station's artificial night cycle continued. Stars visible through the observation windows, the galaxy spinning on, now with one crucial difference. Somewhere in the administrative archives, a new protocol document was being distributed across civilized space. Understanding Deathworld species. Strength is not aggression, and restraint is not weakness. Sarah turned a page in her book, unaware that she'd changed everything. That's how revolutions happen sometimes, not with explosions, but with one person being gentle.